One of the most difficult days of my life as a young adult was after my last college basketball game. I remember we lost, the game was over. I remember sitting in the locker room and thinking to myself, my identity was completely changed now. I was never gonna be an athlete again. And up until that point, that's really all that I had been for like 8 years. It was who I hung out with, it was what I did every day after school, it was the wardrobe that I wore, it was the reason I even went to college. My entire identity for 8 to 10 years was literally just being a basketball player. And then all of a sudden it was like one day and that was it. It had just stopped. And it was seriously one of the most difficult days of my life. And that day's coming for a lot of you guys. A lot of you guys are gonna be done being an athlete or done being in band or drama or choir or whatever it is that you identify yourself as. And the thing about identity that's crazy is when your identity changes, it can be terrifying, but it can also be incredibly liberating. And that's the way that I felt when I got done playing basketball. I got to decide what I cared about again. I got to decide what I wanted to be into. Back then I was a basketball player and I shifted my focus after that to things like skateboarding and music and art and motorcycles. And I realized after I got done playing basketball, you don't have to just be one thing. You don't have to just be, hey, I'm so-and-so and this is what I do. You get an opportunity to kind of decide and redefine yourself. And I think the reason so many people have an identity crisis is because they try to be one thing for their entire life and they don't understand your identity changes. And that's a good thing. When it comes to finding your identity, I think the thing that's so hard for people is you just think one day you're gonna magically wake up and be like, there I am, like I found myself. And I just don't think that's the way that it happens. What I think happens is you get to a point in your life where you don't want to be like anybody else. You don't want to be a different version of yourself. You're really excited and proud of who you are. And I think that comes from putting yourself in positions to try new things or putting yourself in a position to experience something different. But at the end of the day, I think most of us don't want to be something other than ourselves. And if you're trying to be something that you're not or someone that you're not, I think that's when you have an identity crisis because people can see through that. We all have that friend that's just unashamedly themselves, that's just passionately who they are, and they don't care what people think about it. And that's somebody who has confidence in their identity. And for a lot of us, we don't have confidence in our identity. Some of you guys are terrified of your identity. Some of you guys feel like you have to hide your identity. Some of you guys feel like you have to change it when you're around one group of friends or another group of friends. Some of you guys have no idea who you are, and I think the reason why is we spend so much of our time trying to be someone other than who we were designed to be. You all have that kid in your school who pretends to be something on Instagram that you know they're not in real life. You know who that kid is. Some of you are that kid. And the reason why so many people do that is they want their identity to be this giant elaborate thing, and it's so much easier to do that on the internet than it is to do that in real life. It's so much easier to look perfect and curated and important and talented on the internet than it is to do those things in the real world. And I think for a lot of you, if you disconnected, unplugged, took a step back and asked yourself, is that even close to who I actually am? You'd have to answer no. And then I think the important question to ask yourself is, why are you afraid of who you actually are? A lot of you watching this, you think your identity is the hardest thing that you've been through. Every single time I speak to kids, they walk up to me and they introduce themselves and they say, hey, they don't even say their name. They just say, hey, I'm bipolar, or hey, I'm gay, or hey, I'm on the spectrum, or hey, I'm this, or hey, I'm adopted. And kids tell me all the time what's happened to them before they even tell me their name. And so many of you guys have to understand the hardest thing that happened to you isn't your identity. The difficult thing you're going through today, that's not your identity. How you deal with it, the way that you cope with it, or the way that you overcome it, that's going to help shape your identity. But what happened to you, that's not who you are. How you deal with it, that's who you are. When you're in high school, you think it matters so much, like the way you are and what people think about you, and you're so concerned with like unsolving this mystery of like, what's the thing I'm gonna be for the rest of my life? And the older you get, you look back at that mentality and it seems ridiculous. Like most people look back at the high school version of themselves and they laugh at how absurd that person was. And the reason we laugh at that is you were making decisions based on what everybody else thought around you, whether you mean to or not. And when you become an adult or you get a little bit older, or you get confident in who you are, you recognize the only person I'm trying to be is me. The journey to discovering your identity can be one of the most exciting experiences that you have because you should try a ton of new things. And the younger you are, the more time and opportunity you have to figure out what you care about and what you don't. And maybe you're exhausted with this conversation about who am I, what do I care about, who am I gonna be when I grow up? If you don't know what your identity is, the first place you've got to start is with a conversation in your own head and ask yourself, are you creating your identity or is somebody else creating it for you?